So as I said to you last time, we're going to look at book 5 and following, and we're going to look at books 5 to 12 today. And we looked at last time the first 4 books, which aren't the beginning of the story, they're the beginning of the plot. And I made this point at the time, and I want you to remember the significance of this. The plot is where the storyteller chooses to begin the story, which isn't necessarily at the chronological beginning of the story. So a plot is the arrangement of the order of events in order to further the purposes of the storyteller. So a very important part of every story that is told is how you tell the story and in what order you tell the arrangement of things. And in epics, to reiterate what I said last time, epics begin in the middle of events, at a point in crisis. And then, only then, after they've presented the crisis, and last time we saw the nature of the crisis was Odysseus is far from home, and we're going to spend 4 books looking at his son and his wife and their situation. Because Odysseus is separated from his family, and his family's grown up without him, and in the meantime, his wife has been subjected to the unwelcome advances of a variety of suitors, and his son has grown up without a father, and he doesn't know how to act, and he's upset that he's not up to dealing with the challenge in front of him. He looks like his father rather, so he looks like a man, but he doesn't know how to act like a man. And so that's the crisis that begins the Odyssey. The great hero Odysseus, a figure better than we are. Remember, he's a demigod. His mother is a goddess. His father is a man. We'll meet his father later on. Is somebody we can look up to, is our superior, and yet even he is being deprived of things that mere mortals would regard as beyond endurance. To lose absolutely everything. And he is going to, when we first meet him, he has lost everything. He's lost his family, he's lost his companions in war, and he's lost his home, he's lost his bearings. He's been deprived of everything that makes a man a man. And the irony here is that in book 5, we find him in a position which, if we read it through the lens of the modern reader, we might think he's in a great position. He's on an island with a goddess, the most beautiful woman he could ever imagine. And she feeds him ambrosia, which is the food of the gods, and if he stays with her, he will live forever. He will have immortality. He'll be like a god. So every physical desire will be met in this person. And yet he thinks that he's been deprived, so deprived that he's weeping on the beach. And it gives us even the reason why that is, because the nymph no longer pleased him. At first, he might have been, in some way, deceived, whatever, although he landed there by accident. He's not chosen to land there. He says, oh, look, there's that place where that beautiful woman is. Let me land there. He's been wrecked there. He's been brought there. And he's effectively captive there against his will. So it's not called this in the book, but he's effectively a sex slave. That's the situation. A little shocking. You don't really expect it. Probably because of the build-up as far as the noble Odysseus, the great Odysseus. And to see him in that situation, we just don't expect it. So I don't even think we pick up on it. But the argument in book 5 is given here in this edition at any rate. But I'm going to start with the reading of the story. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the line numbers here. I'm going to have to find a lot more translation online that does give it. I know they exist because I've seen it not that long ago. But let me just read a few bits of it, and then I will talk about the significance of what's actually going on here. I don't think I want that, and I don't want that, and I don't want that. Not even sure. We'll just go with this. Aurora, from beside her glorious mate, Tithonus rose, aurora, the sunrise. Light to dispense through earth and heaven, when the assembled gods in council sat, o'er whom high thundering Jove presided, mightiest of the powers above. Amid them, Pallas. Pallas is Athena. One of the confusing things in the Odyssey is that gods get multiple names even. They're often given nicknames. It's Pallas Athena. Athena and Zeus are talking again. Remember, they began in book 1. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, coming to her father saying, look at Odysseus. We're back with them again in book 5. And she, on the numerous woes descanted of Ulysses. Oh, this is frustrating. I don't like this translation at all. Ulysses is the Roman name for Odysseus. So we've got the Latin version here. So I really dislike this translation for our purposes here, because he should be called Odysseus at least. Anyway, whom she saw with grief, still prisoned in Calypso's isle. So there she goes. He's a prisoner. Jove, Father, hear me, and ye other powers. Jove is Jupiter. So yeah, all this has been Latinized. Hear me, and ye other powers who live forever. Hear, be never king henceforth to gracious acts inclined, humane or righteous, but let every sceptered hand rule merciless and deal in wrong alone, since none of all his people whom he swayed with such paternal gentleness and love remembers now divine Ulysses more. So here's the state of affairs. However good he was, this man Odysseus, however father-like he was to his people, however kind he was, it's all been forgotten. The man's deeds have slipped into oblivion. Nobody remembers him. He's like a myth. It's as if he never lived. He's on the island of Calypso. Now, I think I mentioned this last time. Calypso is from a Greek verb, kalyptein, which means to hide. She's hidden him. His fame, his character, his manhood is hidden from the world. Everything about him has been obliterated, covered up. It's as if he never lived. He's a legendary figure, but only a legend. And the legend's incomplete. He never got back home. And he's a prisoner here and he can't escape it. It's a terrible state of affairs for a man who lives for honor. And she says, that is, Athena says, if this is the state of Odysseus, good man though he was, what man will ever henceforth be good? Because there's no reward. If he's rewarded like this, no one will ever do good things ever again. They will just do whatever they want and not care about a good reputation, because he deserved better than this. So that's the charge she made at the beginning. Now she repeats it. And he in yon distant isle, a sufferer lies of hopeless sorrow, through constraint the guest still of the nymph Calypso, without means of power to reach his native shores again, alike of gallant barks and friends deprived who might conduct him o'er the spacious deep. Nor is this all, but enemies combine to slay his son ere yet he can return from Pylos, whither he hath gone to learn there or in Sparta. So not only is Odysseus dealing with an unjust outcome, his son is going to be murdered. This family will demonstrate to everyone throughout history that the gods do not reward good conduct. So the case being brought is this will be the greatest demonstration of that you may as well do what you please and not care about justice at all. Not care about fearing the gods, not care about showing hospitality to strangers, not care about anything that Odysseus has done in accordance with what the gods actually what pleases the gods. You have not rewarded him for it. So why would he do otherwise? And he says, to whom the cloud assembler God replied, what word hath passed thy lips, daughter beloved? Hast thou not purposed that arriving soon at home Odysseus shall destroy his foes? Guide thou Telemachus, or well thou canst, that he may reach secure his native coast, and that the suitors baffled may return. He ceased, and thus to Hermes spake his son, that is, Zeus speaks to Hermes. What's his name in Greek?
Apollo?
No. I still think it is as well. I don't know why they've got it here, because in Latin, his name is Mercury. So they're totally inconsistent. They're using Greek and Roman names. Anyway, he speaks to Hermes, which is the Greek name for him. And Hermes is the messenger of the gods. It's the word from which we get hermeneutics, by the way. It's how we interpret the will of God. The word of God, scripture. Hermeneutics is the means why the messenger relays the message properly. Anyway, and go get him and send him and so forth. So we meet him. And so he sends Hermes forth, and Hermes arrives on land and tells Calypso to let him go, basically. But let me go back to my slide here at the beginning. That's not it. Is that it? That's it. Talked about this last time. I'm going to come to this. I'll come to this next. But he's land on the island of Calypso, and he's going to speak to Calypso, who's covering up Odysseus from the sight of the world, and thereby depriving him of his reward, of his fame for being a good man. And all he is now is a divine pet. He will live forever. He will be satisfied in every physical sense. And yet he believes that he is not being treated like a man. How come? What is the implicit problem here that Homer is identifying? What does it mean to be a man in the Greco-Roman world? How do you live like a man? By being able to take care of your family. That's implied there, but your bodily needs have been met. And there are some in the history of the philosophical tradition that believe that the way that you live your life to its fullest is by indulging the flesh.
A warrior's death.
A warrior's death, but more than a warrior's death, a warrior's life. You want?
I was just going to say, to be remembered, I guess.
Yes, but then you have to be worthy of being remembered. You have to do virtuous things. You have to live a life of virtue and honor. You need to be renowned. People will praise you for your good, great deeds. This man's good, great deeds, and they are great, and they are good. He's the one who brought down the Trojan Wall. Nobody will reward him for that. His reward will be he will live eternally in perpetual physical bliss. What is Homer implicitly saying about the ideal of perpetual physical bliss? Is that an ideal human life? For Homer, clearly not. And yet that's the view of a certain school of philosophy called what? What do we call those who indulge the body and only care about physical pleasure? Yes. Hedonists, yes. Very popular in our day. Hedonism. Homer condemns it. Odysseus at this point is the ideal. He's reaching the ideal hedonistic state. No pain, only pleasure. Forever. He is weeping at this. What is Homer teaching his audience? There's more to life than physical pleasure. You have a higher aim than this. If you were an animal, you'd be very happy. You get fed all the time, you're treated well, you live forever. But a man will not be satisfied with this. So what does it mean to be a human? It's being explored here by Homer. Did you want to comment or a question? Yes, sir. Yes. True. He has no freedom. There's no freedom. If you want to know what the Greeks fought against the Persians, there's a great, been presented in more recent films and so forth, the battle of the Greeks against the Persians and so forth. The Greeks were promised as much pleasure as they wanted. The Greeks said the condition for that is slavery. and I will rather die a free man than live as a slave. Right? Battle between the Spartans and, right? You've seen 300 or read the story of the 300, taken directly from Herodotus, by the way, book 7, Herodotus, it's Greek history. The battle over freedom and the idea that freedom is a part of human nature and being a slave dehumanizes you in some ways. That's not only Christian teaching, it's embedded in the Greco-Roman tradition there. To be a human being is to have a certain degree of freedom. As soon as you're enslaved, you lose something of your humanity. It's presented even more strongly in Scripture, of course, but it's even there embedded in the Greco-Roman tradition there. You're right. So he doesn't have the freedom. He's a slave. He can't do what he wants. And chiefly, he can't decide to live a virtuous life, even though that is what marked his life. He's been robbed of all that. He's been stained, for sure. So for those of us, and when we read this text, I think there's a tendency to, because of the way in which patriarchy is portrayed and male-female relations are portrayed, that we tend to read the text and say, oh yeah, sure, as if he's unhappy here, as if he's really not going along with this. And, I think, well, if you read the text, just what it says, there's no indication that he is actually in agreement with this treatment at all. There isn't. And I think we need to not read into the text what's not there. So yes, he's being unfaithful to his wife, but does he even have a choice? And I think the answer is no. He doesn't have a choice. He doesn't have any choices at this point. So he's being victimized. And it's sort of shocking. You don't expect the hero of a Greek epic to be portrayed in that sort of abject state. But that is how he's being portrayed. And so he is not then, and we just saw this in book 5, he is not being rewarded for living a wise, virtuous life, which Athena, the goddess of wisdom, has made her regard him as her ideal human being. And remember, this is a story about wisdom and the reward of wisdom. And if you read the equivalent book in Scripture, read Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, you will see 2 women being presented. In books 1 to 9, there's Proverbs, the little short, pithy sayings, which dominate the majority of Proverbs. But if you read the beginning of it, books 1 to 9, it presents 2 women calling in the streets. One is a harlot and will enslave you and will lead you down to Sheol, and it will deprive you of every virtue. And she will call out and she will lure you down that path of ruin. But the other woman is the woman of wisdom. And if you hold on to her and be faithful to your wife, the reward for you will be this. And so it says, and Solomon is writing this to his son, he says, choose wisdom, follow wisdom, stay faithful, etc. It's sort of the same message that the Odyssey is teaching. I mean, there are differences in some ways what constitutes wisdom and the nature of the gods and so forth, but this book is about wisdom and what constitutes a human life. And a human life is not physical pleasure eternally. That is an animal state. And so we have to read through that. We also have to read beyond the terrible psychology which has introduced itself into our consciousness that thinks about basic human needs needing to be met before we get to the higher ends of life. What's that called? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Anyone ever been taught Maslow's hierarchy of human needs? Yeah. It's a pyramid, and you have to get the bottom level satisfied before you can reach. It's a materialist view of life, by the way. As if love was not necessary at the bottom end. It's only there at the top end. Tell that to a little baby. You can feed a little baby. There have been experiments done on this, by the way. You can feed a baby nutrients, but unless the baby's held and loved, the baby dies. Love is necessary at the bottom and all the way up at the top. And that's because in Christian theology, it talks about love being the center of all human ethics. from the bottom up, from the earliest stages onwards. Love is not the top of the scale. It's not an aspiration. We think about these abstract ideals only after our physical needs have been met. That's a false teaching, which I think many Christians believe. So it's fine for you to think about these highfalutin ideals about, life, but if you don't have food and clothing and shelter and security and stuff like that, and you can't even think about that sort of thing, that's not true. It becomes harder, but don't tell me that people don't do loving things when they are in a state of poverty. Many poor countries in this world are marked by terrific loving relationships, and they have nothing. Whereas we have a lot of money and a lot of wealth and a lot of food, and we live very loveless, uncaring lives, right? So it's just a false portrait. I just say this because when we read the text, we might misread it. So that's part of our challenge in reading Homer. First of all, just read what he's saying and don't misread it in accordance with our worldview. So in book, let me go back to this. I hate this now. There we go. In book 5, we get the encounter here with Calypso and Hermes. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, goes down. By the way, he's also the patron god of medicine. You see him with a staff and 2 serpents around it. And also the god of, and that's more problematic, of the occult, of tricks and even supernatural phenomenon. And he goes down into Calypso's island, which is a sort of a false home for Odysseus. Remember when I laid out the structure of the story, I had 1 and 4 at the one end, and there was a sort of book ending. And then book 5, I said there's a circle. It's not even clear where this is. It's a false home. He's not home. His physical needs have been met, but the part of Odysseus that is most valuable to him and most valued to Homer, which he's trying to teach the readers, is this home will never get you where you want to be. You need to be away. You need to aim higher than being with Calypso. And Calypso receives him, agrees. I'm going to skip over to make not too much of this and spend the whole class on book 5. Offers to give up Odysseus, and Hermes doesn't believe her, says, you got to swear it. And then she blames him, says, oh, sure, it's fine for you gods to have human sex slaves, and you never say anything, but as soon as a female goddess does so, then you're all exercised and upset. And quite frankly, the charge is correct, because Zeus and the other gods regularly take human lovers, and nobody bats an eyelid. But in this case, the only thing that's incorrect about it is it's not a male-female thing at all. It's that this character is a particularly virtuous man. And virtue is clearly being shown to matter to the gods. And they've actually intervened here and say, nah, you can't do this with this fellow, because he is a special man. Comment or question? No. Okay, so she agrees. And so then Calypso, having heard this, she goes and seeks the brave Odysseus on the shore. She found him seated, tears succeeding tears deluged his eyes, while hopeless of return life's precious hours to eating. Cares he gave continue with the errand, now charmed no more. Yet, cold as she was amorous, still he passed his nights beside her in the hollow grot, constrained and day by day the rocks among, which line the shore, heartbroken sat, and oft, while wistfully he eyed the barren deep, wept, groaned, despondent, sighed, and wept again. So he is as unhappy as he could possibly be. I don't know how you read anything other than that into the text. Yes, he's been unfaithful to his wife. He's been forced to be. Shocker. And she comes to him and says, I'm going to let you go. Hermes told me, I'm going to let you go. Does he believe her? The answer is no. He doesn't believe her for a second. Why? Because she regularly lies to him. She regularly deceives him in order to get his hopes up, to keep him going and keep him doing his pet tricks. And so when she promises to do that, he does not believe her for a second. And so he keeps on questioning and fighting her effectively. Eventually she says, no, I'm going to show you. I'll let you go. And he says, you'll let me go and you'll let me build a raft and then you'll destroy the raft and I'll be back here again. I know you. I know your tricks. You will let me get the illusion of having escaped here and then I'll be back here in a second. And of course, that's exactly what she would have done. But then the gods overrule and bring him to a different place. So let me come to the that part of the story. Conclusion of book 5. As he escapes Calypso, because as he's escaping Calypso, he's a place where nobody can see him except Zeus and the other gods. He gets out from under the like the shade of Calypso, because the word Calypso means hidden, but also it's like shade. A eucalyptus tree is one that gives really good shade. It hides you from the sun. And I said this to you, didn't I? That the word Calypso in Apocalypse, it's something that was hidden and now has been revealed. It's been taken out from what was hidden. That's the book of Revelation, by the way. These things in the last days are now being revealed. This is how things will happen. He comes out from under the umbrella of Calypso, and now Poseidon sees him. Poseidon's been looking for him, and he destroys the life raft. And not only does he destroy the life raft, he threatens to crash him on the reef that's there, and he's going to die terribly. And he manages to preserve himself, but every stitch of clothing is torn off him. He ends up naked on the beach. And then he has to decide, because he has no strength left in him, every ounce of strength, and this is a very strong man, has been expended on trying to get out of the salty water. And now he's exhausted, and it's about to fall night. And at that point, he faces hypothermia. Cold, wet, without clothing, on the beach. He's got a decision to make. Do I go? What's that show that I used to watch with my son? Not that, but there is one like that. No, but it's you make a choice. You either go here or you go there. You choose it for yourself. There's some sort of, I can't remember what it's called. No, but it's like that sort of thing. No, it's the story depends on which choice you click on the screen, and then you go. Anyway, does he go up and does he go into the woods where it's warmer? He won't be exposed to the elements. But if he goes up there, then the wild animals are there. Or does he stay on the beach? And if he stays on the beach, then he's going to die of hypothermia. What does he do? Wisdom is needed here. Well, what does he do? He stays on the beach. But when he stays on the beach, he covers himself up with leaves. And that keeps the warmth in. Like if you're going to, in Canada in the winter, if you're exposed, you would want twigs and all sorts of stuff on top of you. You can even bury yourself in the snow. And the snow would actually insulate you from the cold. Right? No, it does. So you got to find a way to survive the night. That's what he's looking to do. And here he's got leaves. He piles the leaves upon himself and he survives it. But he literally survival by this much. He has nothing at that point. And here's his question. What doom at last awaits me? If I watch this woeful night here at the riverside, what hope but that frost and copious dews, weak as I am, my remnant small of life shall quite extinguish, and the chilly air breathe from the river at the dawn of day. But if ascending this declivity I gain the woods, and in some thicket sleep, if sleep indeed can find me, overtoiled and cold benumbed, then I have cause to fear lest I be torn by wild beasts and devoured. Long time he mused, but at last his course bent to the woods, which not remote he saw from the sea brink, conspicuous on a hill, arrive, and decides to get in there, and then finds a covert which nor rough winds blowing moist could penetrate, nor could the noonday sun smite through it, or unceasing showers pervade, so thick a roof the ample branches form close in a room. And under these the chief, retiring with industrious hands, a bed collected broad of leaves. So he sleeps in the forest, covers himself with leaves, and keeps himself alive for one more night. And that bed with joy the suffering chief renowned contemplated, and occupying soon the middle space, hillocked it high with leaves, as when some swain hath hidden deep his torch beneath the embers, at the verge extreme of all his farm, where having neighbors none, he saves a seed or two of future flame alive, doomed else to fetch it from afar. So with dry leaves Odysseus overspread his body, on whose eyes Minerva, that is, Athena, poured the balm of sleep copious, that he might taste repose again after long toil severe. So, anyone had a campfire in the summer? And it burns down, you've got embers left. How do you keep it alive till the next day? You cover it up with ash. How come? How does that work? Yeah. Yes, but also what does it take for a fire to burn? Oxygen. If you keep oxygen from it, it burns at a slower rate. So the small little ember will be kept alive. So it's being compared. His life is being compared to an ember here. Now, this is an epic simile, but it's a great epic simile. Anybody who's had a fire recognizes that's how close to extinguishment he is, just like that. So he covers himself with leaves, and the fire of his life is kept that close by the leaves. So and yet he's covered. So he goes from being totally covered to being in this state where there's just a small flicker of life left in him, and he survives the night. It's a great description. I mean, part of the Odyssey is not just the plot, but how the plot is told. Like, this is a great illustration. You'll never forget it. Right? This is one of the reasons people read epics is not just the story that's told, but how it's told sticks with you. Just like Mentor, who Christians read and say, Mentor. That's a great illustration for how an older man ought to treat a younger man. Teach him the ways of wisdom. So that's where this begins. Then we come to book 6. And the island on which he's landed is the land of the Phaeacians. He doesn't know this. But now he's on the land of the Phaeacians. Now he's going to be in the land of the Phaeacians from book 6 all the way to book 13. And the land of the Phaeacians is somewhere in between this world where he lives and Ithaca is and Troy is and the gods are. Now the gods are in Mount Olympus. It's somewhere in between. It's a place nobody knows exists. And in fact, after he leaves it, Zeus and the other gods shut off the entrance, so now nobody can get in there or get out of there. But it was there, according to Homer. He's in an in-between stage. And the Phaeacians are godlike people who act like good human beings, except they never really ever go to war. They never fight, they never die, but they act like warriors. They act virtuously, but never testing it. They're always in training, but they never actually do it. And they will meet Odysseus, and some of them will receive him well with hospitality, and others will abuse him and mock him and challenge him, even though he's a stranger. And Homer is allowing us to see in various instances how people are received, how hospitably they are, how not, and the character of the people that receive them. So these people appear to be virtuous, but are they actually virtuous in how they receive Odysseus? And the answer is in some cases yes, and in other cases no. But he's now in a land, and he doesn't know where he is, and he doesn't know what sort of reception he's going to have. Now, why is he suspicious of that? Well, because in the midst of all this, books 9 to 12 are going to recount Odysseus' story within the story. Book 9 is the beginning of the story when he leaves Troy. Remember I said the Iliad is the account of the Battle of Troy? When he first leaves Troy, this is the first event that happens, book 9. And Odysseus is going to tell that story, what happens of all these different events, until the cattle of the sun god are slain, at which point he loses all of his crewmates, and he ends up on the island of Calypso, where we meet him in book 5. But the plot begins in the land of Ithaca, where he'd come from before he left for Troy. Then goes, so books 1 to 4 go there. Book 5 looks at Odysseus in a false home, not his true home. And then it takes him away from there, and then he lands on the island of the Phaeacians. And then when he is finally asked to tell his own story, then we find how he got to this point. So there's a story on the outside that reveals a story in that, and then a story within the story. And those are Odysseus' own account of his Odyssey. These books are technically called the Apologoi, from which we get apologetics as well, right? His explanation for how he got where he is. Because it doesn't make any sense. A man of virtue, how on earth did he end up naked without anything when they meet him? How is that even possible? Well, he's going to tell the story of how that is. And it's a story of suffering. And so what we see here, just as in Scripture, we see that wisdom and suffering are very closely allied, often connected. It's very difficult to become wise without suffering. If you want to look to a book of Scripture that presents that most clearly, it's the book of Job. There are a variety of books of wisdom literature in Scripture. One of them is the book of Job, wisdom through suffering. Proverbs is a different type of wisdom literature. Same with the Psalms. Same with Ecclesiastes. These are different types of wisdom literature, different approaches to it. But wisdom and suffering often go together. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 1, where it talks about wisdom and suffering. Comment or question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I know that the reason Odysseus can't return home is because of Poseidon's wrath against him for finding his son.
Yes, right here.
Yeah, but it seems like it's already happened before that. Like when he goes to the Lotus Eaters and stuff, it almost seems like they're already trying to stop him from getting him, or something's trying to, like things are getting in the way.
He's encountering obstacles for sure.
Yeah, but that's just, is it more like just by chance? Or?
I think so. I don't know if there's anything by chance in it per se. It sounds like, but it sounds like this is the thing that really stops him. Right here, when he gets here and gets Poseidon against him, then he's not getting back. Poseidon is determined to stop him. Up to this point, he's encountering various beings, weird and wonderful supernatural beings that are threatening his crewmates, and he's losing some, but he's not going to lose them all. As he goes on here, he loses some and loses some and loses some and loses some, and he keeps on losing them. By the time he gets here, all those that are left with him, like they're almost there, and he's warned, whatever you do, don't eat the cattle of the sun god. Whatever you do, Odysseus, don't do that. He warns them not to do it. The men are starving. They're starving. Like they have had no food. And they say, we don't care. That's food. And we are starving. So they take it and they all die. All except him. Because he is able to resist his appetite. He's even able to suppress his hunger. As powerful a motivation as hunger is, he is able to overrule it with his mind, with his wisdom. He will say, no, I'm not going to do that because I know if I do that, here's the consequence. So Odysseus is the role model where every other man fails, Odysseus succeeds. Yes?
I was also wondering, like it seems like the Olympian gods are supposed to be like act justly, but it seems like Poseidon's not really acting very justly.
Indeed.
Towards Odysseus.
Yeah, and he has a particular reason for that, which is he blinded his son.
Yeah.
But he seems rather petty and rather extreme in his notion of this, and his son's a real jerk. And his son was eating Odysseus's friends and was going to eat them all and kill them all. So you would have thought that would be a factor in this. What does he care? He's not just. You're right. You're right. Poseidon is portrayed as unjust. The father of gods and men, Zeus, is the one who looks to justice, and he's the one, and Athena appeals to him. His brother seems to be a little bit more selfish and a little bit more tribal. Yeah, these are I don't care. This is my son. You've blinded him. You're never going to get back home. And Zeus says, he's fated to get back home. You can't stop this. And then so at the beginning of the Odyssey, while Poseidon's away, we'll get him home quickly. And then when he discovers he's going to be really angry, and I'll think of something then. But do it quickly. So Zeus is portrayed as a politician. His brother is portrayed as a petty, vindictive, small, tribal deity. The gods are not portrayed very well. You don't admire the gods, even though Zeus does seem to regard wisdom and virtue. He sort of has to be cajoled into doing it by his daughter, with Athena. Yes. The fault in her? It's hard to find a fault in wisdom, right? That's one of the, but wisdom is a very abstract sort of thing in some ways. Although note that I didn't mention this, but maybe it struck you when I said this. Wisdom is personified as a woman, not just here, but also in Proverbs. It's very interesting, both cases. Unless you make too much of that, Jesus Christ is the wisdom of God. And that's not a feminine. There's nothing feminine about Jesus in saying that. Doesn't make him effeminate. It doesn't, but there's something about the way of wisdom which maybe is a little indirect and yet gets to the point in a more effective way than the direct. So you can touch your own nose in two ways. You can go this, or you can go, you can touch your nose by going around. You can still touch your nose. Wisdom tends to find the way around. That's the cleverest way. The most direct way is just like that, sure. But maybe there are reasons why you want to do that in a different way. Wisdom tends to do the one that's very shrewd, crafty, clever, and still gets the outcome. And of course that fits then divine wisdom, because the ways of the Greeks are foolishness. It's foolishness to the Greeks. But to God, this is the way of the cross. Like, who on earth would ever deal with the problem of injustice by giving his own life for the ungodly? God himself would. Yes? Can you repeat that? The negative would have been hidden desire? Oh, the negative against her. Well, I would say it more strongly. She seems to value lying, outright lying. There is no condemnation of lying in the Odyssey at all. In fact, she herself regularly deceives and regularly lying, tells flat untruths. And so does Odysseus. He lies through his teeth all the time and deceives. And all of the figures that demonstrate wisdom, Telemachus, Odysseus, Penelope, Athena, are all tricksters. So wisdom is presented as false speaking, as dissembling, and no Christian's going to agree with that. You got to be able to square it. So you got to be able to tell the truth, but tell the truth in a sort of roundabout way, but you're still telling the truth. You can't lie. So lying and wisdom have to go together. In the Greek telling of this, so this is the Christian critique of it, wisdom does not entail lying. That's not the way of wisdom. Why? Well, because God is always truthful. God never lies. He can't lie. But that's a Christian, that's a biblical assertion about God's character. That's not one we see exemplified in the Odyssey at all. The Greek gods don't do it. None of them do it. The wise characters lie all the time. They dissemble, misrepresent. They weave webs like Penelope. Remember, the suitors are waiting to marry her. And she says, well, as soon as I finish this, I've been weaving a funeral shroud for my father-in-law. As soon as I'm done that, I'll marry one of you. And so she does it, and she's really busy, and she does that during the day, and that night she unweaves it, and the idiots who are so drunk and filled with meat, and they got all the women in Odysseus's court, and they're so distraught. They don't notice it for years, which is sort of incredible. And then they finally catch her and say, we've got you now. We see that what you're doing. You're going to finish that shroud. Okay, but she is using her wisdom to prevent a bad outcome, and she's praised for it. Comment? Or not Greek wisdom. She misrepresents Christian wisdom. But again, I said to you, the way I'm going to try and represent this course is try to read the texts in the way that they're being presented to us without judging them, but then observe, so this is what they're saying. Don't read them through our lens, but then we can critique them as Christians. Say, are we really going to accept that wisdom means lying? And the answer is no. Of course not. All the same, lying is highly effective. And Homer seems to be praising it. And it seems to be the chief characteristic of our hero Odysseus. He's a liar. And Athena in book 13 is going to say flat out, the reason I love you is you're just like me. You never stop lying. You don't trust anybody. What a guy. Yeah, that's it. You're wonderful. You don't trust anyone. Okay, is that the way you really ought to live your life? Distrusting everybody? But it's consistently portrayed in the Odyssey. They will regularly test one another because they don't, and so this is part of the Greco-Roman world as well, they don't trust appearances. Now, this is important. This is a philosophical mindset. Things may not be as they appear, because sometimes gods present themselves as human beings, and they're there to trick you. In fact, the gods do it all the time. So someone can come forward, say, hey, Penelope, it's Odysseus, I'm home. And it's a god who is trying to sleep with her, has his way with her, whatever. She doesn't trust anything. Likewise, he doesn't trust anyone. Distrust is being presented as a virtuous character. Try building a society of stability that will last for generations based on that fundamental distrust. Impossible. Impossible. What societies do last? Those that are built on covenant promises given and held to by people. You say what you're going to say. You give your word and you stick to your word. And that's how God presents himself. He has covenants with humanity. And he holds to it. He never lies. He always fulfills his side of the bargain. Humanity regularly betrays his covenant. God never does. He always upholds his end of the bargain. So God is being revealed as a covenant keeper, whereas we are covenant breakers. And we might call that wisdom. And God says, what you call wisdom, I call folly. All right, so that is biblical as well. It's just a critique of this from the Christian vantage point. So let me backtrack a little bit here before we get to that account. Odysseus and Nausicaa. Nausicaa is the woman that he meets in book 6. Who is the daughter of the king among the Phaeacians, and she is there. She's the one that Odysseus first meets when he lands on the land of the Phaeacians. She's the princess daughter of the king, and she goes out and lying, and Minerva, Athena, in Latin it's Minerva, in Greek Athena, comes to her and tells her to get moving and go out and ask for her daddy's car and go down to the beach and wash clothing. Why does Athena do this? Because she wants Nausicaa to meet Odysseus and bring him back. She doesn't tell her that. It's manipulating the situation. Athena presents herself in the form of a woman here. And she then does what she's told. She asks her father for the carriage, the chariot, goes down, and the girls start playing a game of ball. They throw a ball and it goes too far and it lands in the water, and the water goes over, and Odysseus hears the cries of the girls and then comes up, wakes up from his sleep, and Odysseus wonders, what on earth is this? And he asks, where am I? What sort of place is this? Is this a place where there are civilized people? Or is this a place where I'm going to be beset by monstrous evils again? Why does he say that? Because these events, he's already lived through all these. Remember, chronologically, these things have happened already to him. So when he lands in books 6, 7, and 8, this is chronologically after these events. So he's terrified. Okay, what sort of place have I landed now? Could be anything. And I've already experienced this. I really have to be careful in what I do here. What avails to ask? I will myself go forth and see. So saying, divine Odysseus from beneath his thicket crept, and from the leafy wood a spreading branch plucked forcibly. So he takes a branch, breaks it off, and holds it. Not the proverbial fig leaf, but he's covering himself. Design a decent screen effectual held before, so forth he went as goes the lion forth. Look at Homer's metaphor here, Homer's epic simile. He goes forth, these are little young adolescent girls, and he comes forth, a man with no clothes on. And you can imagine the scene. He goes forth, the mountain lion conscious of his strength, whom winds have vexed and rains, fire fills his eyes, and whether herds or flocks or woodland deer he rends them in a dust for blood, abstains not even from the guarded fold. So such sure to seem in virgin eyes, the chief, all naked as he was, left his retreat, reluctant by necessity constrained, him foul with seam foam, horror struck they viewed, and o'er the jutting shores fled all dispersed. Nausicaa alone fled not. So all the girls, when they see this giant man naked come out from this, girls scream and run, all except Nausicaa. She holds her nerve. Here we have what Homer regularly does. We have the main characters, but then we have minor characters, but the minor characters also display wisdom and virtue. So here we have a young woman in a very challenging, compromising situation. How does she conduct herself? Homer is teaching us how to behave if we're young women in certain situations. Not that we're going to confront this situation. I mean, the naked man on the beach, I don't think that scenario is coming up. It's saying something about being courageous, keeping your wits about you, not just screaming in terror when you see the spider. Everyone's afraid of the spider or the mouse or whatever. Keep your wits. And she does. And not only does she do that, but Athena made her courageous. And by power divine, all tremor took away. So it's presented in a way, we always appeal to psychology. They don't have any notion of psychology. When they're given a spiritual support that seems beyond their own, it's a God that comes in and gives them that power. We would explain this as Christians. The Holy Spirit came to me at that point and helped me resist a temptation that I could not have resisted. I don't even know how I did it at that point. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but there's a sort of sometimes divine protection in situations. That's what is being illustrated here. It's not a psychological thing because it goes beyond her. The gods themselves have intervened to give her support in this, to be virtuous. So again, wisdom comes to Nausicaa and gives her a firmness that she would not have naturally had, and he's not quite sure what to do. Now, what are the choices here? Well, the normal thing you do when you greet somebody whose land you're coming to is you fall to your knees and grasp their knees. You're supplicating yourself. You're asking for their support, their favor, their hospitality. You're on your knees, right? It's like a begging posture. The problem with that, as you can imagine, she's a young woman and he is naked. So if he does this, that's going to cause problems. But if he doesn't do this, he will appear like he doesn't understand hospitality, the rules of hospitality at all. So now he's again got a dilemma. Do I do this or do I do that? But note, there's the dilemma. And again, we're thinking along with Homer here. What do we do in this situation? He doubtful stood, or to implore the lovely maid, either this, her knees embracing, or aloof standing to ask in gentle terms discreet the gift of clothes and guidance to the city where she dwelt. Him so deliberating, most at length this counsel pleased, in suppliant terms aloof to sue to her, lest if he clasped her knees, the virgin should that bolder course resent. Then gentle thus and well advised he spake, O queen, thy earnest suppliant I approach, as art thou some goddess or a mortal race. Okay, so he debases himself and speaks of her as a goddess as if he's on his knees. So he's showing that he is on his knees by elevating her. That's the way of wisdom there. Wise choice. Obvious. We might say obvious choice, but the normal thing in this situation would be to fall to his knees and grasp her knees, and he doesn't do that. So again, he's choices to make. It's not that there's no choices here. He's a free man. That doesn't mean there's no choices of good and better here. And makes her a comparison. Oh, the comparison. If you today want to praise a woman for her beauty, what are you going to do? What are you going to talk about? What will you speak of? Physical description at any rate, right? No? Compliment how they dress, compliment their figure, their fitness, their natural beauty. You're going to describe their physical form in some way. That's the typical form of idealization of beauty, and it's ever since the Renaissance in Italy, when people are represented as having assertive bodily perfection. That's what we tend to do. If you look at biblical poetry, on the other hand, look at the Song of Solomon, women are regularly compared to things that are not flattering at all. Your teeth are like sheep coming up from the dip. Sheep that go into brown dip that smells. You think, are you saying that my breath smells like, or that my teeth are brown? No. You've got breasts like the Tower of David. What? Like, up, out, like, really? You got, so those are the physical descriptions that we get in the love poetry of Scripture. Are those physical descriptions at all? And the answer is no. You're not supposed to take them as, he's not describing what the breasts look like. She's not describing what the teeth look like, let alone what the teeth smell like. He's talking about things of value and of worth and of reverence and of familiarity, and praising her for all those associations, but he's not giving a physical description. Likewise here. We tend to think of love poetry, it must be physically descriptive. They don't see it. They are talking about value as the thing. You praise somebody for value in comparison to valuable things. So he says what? If you're some goddess and from heaven arrived Diana, then daughter of mighty Jove I deem thee most. Okay, so the virgin compares her to the virgin goddess. For such as hers appear thy form, thy stature, and thy air divine. But if of mortal race thou dwell below, thrice happy then thy parents I account, and happy thrice thy brethren. Ah, the joy which always for thy sake their bosoms fill, when thee they view all lovely as thou art, entering majestic on the graceful dance. But Him beyond all others blessed I deem, the youth who wealthier than his rich compeers shall win and lead thee to his honored home. For never with these eyes of mortal form beheld I comparable aught to thine in man or woman, except once. One time in Delos I beheld a palm tree. You're beautiful beyond compare, you're like a goddess. And there's only one comparison. Oh yeah, there was once this palm tree. Oh, the hair, and that's beside the altar of Apollo, tall and growing still, for thitherto I sailed, and numerous were my foes. And as then I view that palm, long time amazed, for never grew so straight a shaft, so lovely from the ground. So, princes, thee with wonder I behold, charmed with fixed astonishment. So note the comparison. It's not the sort of physical description that we'd expect. It reminds him of something that struck him with wonder. That's what it was. Same thing biblical poetry does in love poetry. Really interesting. Not what we would expect. Not that we would ever do. But we're the children of the Renaissance in that sense. We think that art should be physically proportionate, descriptive, whatever. The ideal in art is like a photograph. Almost. Anyway, so he asks her, she takes him, I'm going to have to move swiftly on here. He asks her to take him to her father. She does so, but as he gets and gives him clothes, that's good. But whose clothes are they? Her father's and her brother's. So now he's got clothes on, but they're not his clothes, they're their clothes. Now, if he comes back into the city in a cart wearing her familiar family clothes, what are the people going to conclude about him and her? Yes, probably. But not married, because there's been no marriage ceremony. Worse then, they're a couple, but without marriage. Scandal. So he gets off the cart when they approach the city, realizing this is going to be misunderstood, gets off the cart, lets her go in, tell her father, I met this man, and then he comes in, and then he gets treatment. But anyway, there's wisdom all along in how he enters the situation. Just little subtle things. He comes in, and he presents himself in the court, and what happens? He hears the story. First of all, he's treated with honor. This is very interesting. So unlike all of these stories where he's treated terribly, there's no hospitality, there's no good treatment. He's treated the way he would be back in Greece. The way Telemachus greeted Athena at the beginning of the Odyssey. He's given a footstool to put his feet up on. He can wash his hands and feet. He's asked after his well-being. He's given food. And then only then, when he's feeling content, do they ask him about himself. They're not interrogating him. They're just politely asking him. And while that's going on, there is a singer in the court, and the singer is doing what Homer would have done. I told you that there's a tradition of Homer in the rhapsodes that will regularly entertain the court. They strum a lyre, and they sing the stories of heroes of old, and they happen to be singing the story of who else? Odysseus and Agamemnon and the heroes of Troy. They're singing about the Trojan War, and here they have one right in their midst. They don't even realize that's who it is. And as Odysseus hears the story for the first time, because this is the first time he hears the story, he's weeping because he hears what happened to all his companions. They died along the way. So not only did he lose all of his own companions, all of the guys that he were captains and generals and the commander of the whole Athenian army, Agamemnon was slain by his wife and a suitor. And his son had to avenge him, but what a terrible end. And he's weeping. And he holds up a cloth to cover his tears, because his tears are revealing him for who he is. Because it's a moving story, but it's not going to bring you to tears unless it's a little bit too close to home. And it is for him. But the tears will reveal him. And to be a wise character, he needs to hide, disguise himself, conceal his identity. but that's his choice. Calypso hides his identity, and he has no choice in it. To be wise is to hide your own identity until you choose to reveal it. And that's actually what Athena is going to counsel him to do. Never reveal who you are. Never. Because as soon as you do, you expose yourself to harm. But the king notices that he's weeping, doesn't, and this is very discreet and rather shows the good character of the king, doesn't tell the others, look at this guy, he's crying. He notices it and says, stranger, tell us your stories. And so then he tells these stories. A whole series of stories. And I'm going to get to some of those stories. I'll talk more about them in the next class. In particular, I'm going to mention this one, book 9, and this one, The Journey to the Underworld. I'll particularly focus on this one. But all of these represent different types of temptations that he needs to withstand. So the Lotus Eaters, it's like drugs. Men who come away from war often deal with their psychological distresses, their post-traumatic stress, by drinking drugs. It helps them forget the pain, but it makes them lose their identity in the process. So they physically return, but mentally they can't. They have to deal with being back here, and they can't deal with the traumas of war. This is the temptation that the Lotus Eaters give this. The Laestrygonians in book 10 are giants. If you ever read C.S. Lewis's The Silver Chair, he's plucked it directly from this. Bring them to the table and eating them. Circe, the goddess of the underworld, is the one that leads them downward. I'll talk about that next time very quickly. I'm going to move over it rather quickly. But then there are other encounters like the Polyphemus. I'll look at the Cyclops next time. The Laestrygonians only survived because Odysseus hid his ship around in another cove, whereas the other ships were exposed too close. The wisdom of Odysseus saves them from the giants. Here, picking up a man and smashing him down and then eating them. Circe and so forth. I'll go over these next time. But a whole variety of terrible events that cause trauma and make Odysseus not just a figure of wisdom, but a figure of suffering. And again, Homer is teaching us something about dealing with suffering and becoming better as a result of it, which again seems to match up to some degree with Christian wisdom, except that in Christian theology, suffering is something that God himself endures. So this is the thing. The gods do not endure what Odysseus does. They regard it as a contradiction of their character. It's terrible that Odysseus is suffering this. It's a demonstration of injustice that Odysseus is suffering this. Whereas in Christian theology, God himself becomes man and gives himself over to suffering and lays down his life. So that through his suffering, people who deserve his justice, that is his condemnation, deserve death, are brought and restored to relationship with him. So the suffering there is something that God himself willingly undergoes. And so it's not remote from the gods. God's justice is seen in the cross. It's a very different theological portrait than what we see here. But the idea of suffering being something that's connected with wisdom is seen here in the Greeks. It's just the way it is very different. Comments or questions? If not, I will pick it up next time. Okay. And I will read on next time. I've got behind a little bit here. I will, as I say, I'm going to focus on these episodes, Polyphemus the Cyclops, because that's the one that leads to Odysseus. There's a little passage there where he reveals himself, moment of madness on his part and folly. He tells his name. And then I'll go to the underworld in particular and look at Homer's underworld. I want to look at that. And then we will move forward to books 13 and onward. We've got 2 more classes, I think. Okay? So I'll see you next time. Thank you. So I have